if you were to kind of just summarize the last 5 years for folks and what there is to be celebrating, well, the success stories from cultured meat, because they're a little hard to necessarily see. And even within that category, maybe someone has seen like headlines about Believer Meats, which I believe they closed, right?
They did.
So maybe we can go into that. But let's start with the success. So where has this industry kind of moved since we last discussed, and what have been some of the significant milestones?
I mean, I think you just mentioned the regulatory milestones. So 3 years ago, right now, was the first approvals in the United States to sell cultivated meat. And that was Eat Just and Upside. And 4 years ago, it was just Singapore all by themselves. And now I think there are half a dozen countries, including, we talked about Vow Foods last time. They've done some really, really interesting and just groundbreaking work with how to think about manufacturing. And much to their credit, they shared it with the world. So there were things that we believed to be true even just 3 or 4 years ago that we now know are not true about how we can scale up manufacturing for cultivated meat. GFI launched our competitive grant program. So we spend like $3 to $5 million per year trying to solve some of the critical challenges that our science team has identified. We launched that in 2019, and we put $1 million into cultivated meat, which more than doubled the amount of money. $1 million more than doubled the amount of money that had gone into open access science since 2005. There was a Dutch government grant in 2005, but between 2006 and 2019, less than $1 million went into this. And
so just to be clear, that's your scientist doing science, and or you're working with other scientists, and then they're publishing it and making it available for the industry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we basically say we need to figure out how to replicate animal fat using plant fat, because our analysis shows that coconut oil is not that great, but it's the best thing we've got. And at 5% plant-based meat, there's no coconut oil left. So we need to solve this problem. And so we'll do a call for proposals, and we'll get grants in, and we'll give $250,000 to teams around the world to help solve that problem. So we put $2 million into plant-based meat, which was significantly more, probably 10 times as much as total funding for plant-based meat in all of time up through 2019. And the $1 million for cultivated meat was more than in the previous 14 years. And now there is somewhere on the order of $250 million that has gone into open access science, all from governments. Not nearly enough, but it's a move in the right direction. Even more money has gone into the private sector. I think I mentioned this earlier, but through the end of 2016, a total of 4 science papers in cultivated meat. And it really wasn't that many more in 2017, 2018, 2019, but it's steadily growing. And the focus on the correct problems is also growing. So a guy who was chair of the biomedical engineering department at Tufts, he put in a grant for $10 million to USDA to set up a national center for cellular agriculture, which is focused on cultivated meat. And he got that grant. Really hard to imagine somebody like more established or more impressive in tissue engineering. And I did a sit-down fireside chat with him in January at the Tufts Cultivated Meat Conference. And he said, in the last 5 years, we have made so much more progress than on the science challenges in an open access way than he really could have imagined. And there really does seem to be a consensus among scientists in the area that the science challenges to get to price and taste parity, we didn't know 5 years ago that for sure there wouldn't be something that we just hadn't discovered. Like, can we actually make cell culture media inexpensively enough? Can we scale up bioreactors enough? That second one is still a question mark to some degree. If there were going to be a science or engineering challenge that was going to doom the cultivated meat endeavor, because unless we get to price and taste parity, it doesn't work. We now know on everything other than bioreactor scale up, the path is very clear. And the sort of biomechanical engineers are confident that you can do this at 200,000 liters, but nobody's ever come close to that. So if there were going to be an engineering challenge that ended up making this not happen, that would be it.
Just to be clear, the media is what you grow the cells in.
Yeah, exactly.
It's providing like the nutrients the cells feed on it. They grow, replicate. And then the bioreactor, I think we spoke about this previously. It's kind of like a big brewery.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It looks like, the facilities that exist now look like, the cultivators that are growing the meat basically look like a brew pub fermenter.
Which is a much nicer way of thinking about the food production side of cultured meat than thinking of a petri dish and a white lab coat.
Yeah, I mean, I say in the book, the idea of lab-grown meat is such a misnomer because every ag university on the planet has a meat lab. 99.999% of meat labs, probably higher, are focused on conventional meat. The meat that people actually consume, you're comparing meat from a farm and a slaughterhouse to meat from something that looks like a brew pub. And Uma Valetti, the CEO of Upside Foods, likes to talk about how his production system has glass walls, which it literally does, which you're not going to have glass walls in like a conventional meat slaughterhouse. So the transparency value is also significantly higher.
Today's episode is proudly brought to you by 8 Sleep. I've been tracking my sleep with 8 Sleep for over 3 years now, and one pattern has become completely predictable. When I get 7 to 8 hours in bed, and roughly half of that time is split between deep and REM sleep, I feel at my absolute best. I wake up light and fresh, I have energy throughout the day, and I'm cognitively sharp in a way that's noticeably different from those nights where those numbers are much lower. 3 things that almost guarantee those results for me are a consistent bedtime, being off devices at least an hour before bed, and using 8 Sleep to temperature control my mattress. And that last one surprised me when I started because I was a skeptic. I knew sleep mattered, but I didn't fully appreciate how much temperature was the lever. Your body needs to cool down to enter deep sleep, and the pod actively manages that for you throughout the night. The Pod 5 by 8 Sleep is a smart cover for your existing mattress. It heats or cools each side independently from 55 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It adapts automatically to your body's signals through the night by what's called autopilot, and it tracks deep sleep, REM, heart rate, HRV, and a whole lot more, all without wearing a single thing. Clinical grade accuracy built right into your bed. Users see up to 34% more deep sleep per night. I will say for me, it's been one of the most reliable investments I've made in my health. The pod is not a medical device and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice. Use my code THEPROOF at 8sleep.com/theproof for up to $350 off the Pod 5. And the cool thing is you get 30 days to try it at home. Return it if you don't love it, but I'm confident you will. That's 8sleep.com/theproof. Use the code THEPROOF.